Let's have a look at workflow management tools. Now, in this particular topic, I'll define what I mean by a workflow management tool and their role in software development particularly, but not only. The problems that workflow management tools overcome, the problems that they create, and then we'll have a look at some of the tools themselves. Now, a definition of workflow is a sequence of connected steps. Now you might think of that as, well, that's pretty obvious. It is in some ways. These are the steps that you go through to achieve these ends. However, there isn't agreement in the software industry about the steps that you ought to go through in order to achieve the right outcome. Now, particularly and specifically, an awful lot of people in industry and an awful lot of companies think that developing software is merely, well, you sit down at your desk and you write code, and that's software development. Now, anybody who's vaguely professional will tell you that no, that's kind of like building a skyscraper by just starting with the brickies at the front and laying bricks until you build a skyscraper. It doesn't work like that. And there needs to be a certain amount of planning, a certain amount of monitoring what's going on, a particular sequence of actions to get the architecture right, the code developed, for example, checked, tested, reviewed, and before it can be considered complete. Now, workflow management tools help to enforce that discipline of doing things the way they're supposed to be done and not taking shortcuts. So that's some of the advantages of workflow tools, that they do enforce the particular sequence of actions. Now, it's not just in software development that you can see this. Workflow management tools have become quite a fashion and also quite useful in business generally, where it's called business process management. It's still a workflow, dealing with applications for, I don't know, bank loans or insurance loans, any type of application, where it has to go through a sequence of checks. That workflow through these sequence of checks is quite automatable. And similarly, insurance claims is, I guess, one of the other major points. There are certain numbers of activities that have to go on, a certain number of checks that have to be made before the claim can be paid out. And workflow management tools or business process management tools help to ensure that those processes are followed, that the various necessary checks are done. Well, the advantages are, as I say, it gives you a great deal of visibility into the actual process and where things are in the process. It's kind of difficult to disguise it when some item of work transits from one state in the workflow to another state, or one stage to another stage. So that's the visibility is quite a good thing so far as managing the work is concerned. The other advantage of these workflow management tools is that there is a great deal of expertise that's been built up in operations research where it concerned actual factory production. A lot of this is to do with capacity management, making sure you don't get bottlenecks or what to do with bottlenecks, and essentially is managing the amount of work. Now, all of these technology and techniques now become available to what you wouldn't normally think of as factory production, but it does become a production. It is a workflow, and managing all that workflow allows all these techniques to be employed, which is probably a fairly good thing. But it does come with some disadvantages as well. And the disadvantages are that workflow systems do tend to become somewhat rigid. You define the workflow and it can deal with what it can deal with. It can't deal with things outside its scope. So it becomes very difficult to handle exceptions. And anybody who's tried to argue with any form of bureaucracy where you just get told, well, the system can't do that, and I'm sorry, there's nothing you can do, will understand these problems of rigidity. It just it's very hard to deal with things that that weren't anticipated, and it becomes very difficult to alter the workflow system itself. So there is a tendency to become rigid, and as a consequence, one of the problems with that is because you get all of these interlocking workflow systems, the whole ability of the organization to innovate becomes compromised, and that's a major disadvantage of a lot of these workflow systems. The tools that are available in software development area for workflow tend to be the ticketing tools. These are available for a ticket is a ticket. It could be anything. Frequently, I think they started out mostly being used for defects where there was a sequence of states that a defect was associated with. So a defect was reported, it was analyzed, it was allocated to somebody to investigate. It had been investigated, and the cause found. Then it went from there to a state of well, we're trying to implement something. And then implemented, tested, deployed, resolved, closed. So that workflow did tend to come out with defects earlier than anything else. But now that kind of workflow has been applied to new development, where the whole idea is, well, what's the difference between new development and defects? It's still altering the code in some fashion, so we'll just use the same similar kind of workflow. And that's what happens. The various ticket systems that are available just have various states. Frequently you can define them yourself to suit your own operations or your own circumstances, and you can have different workflows for different kinds of things, usually state-based. One of the more popular in the world at the moment is a tool called JIRA, and they have, I think it's about 5 states. The initial one of the states is open, so a ticket is open. It's in progress. It's closed. It can be reopened, and it can be resolved. So something can be resolved but not closed, because it might be resolved by the developers but not accepted by the client, for example. And until it is, it can't be closed. If it was closed, we may have closed it prematurely, so it can be reopened and then gone back through in progress. Now that's a fairly simple workflow for software development, but it works okay. So in summary then, the workflow tools are very much the process-based tools, where they do enforce a particular discipline about the states that something must go through. Now this I think is a good thing, because it makes it much more difficult to take shortcuts in the usual one is we'll shortcut our planning, or we'll shortcut our reviews, or we'll shortcut our testing. The whole thing is to write the code, and we write the code and deliver the code. No, the workflow tools do enforce much more discipline than that, and as I said, I think it's a very good thing, and has tended to result in much better software. So that was that for workflow tools.